This is Julia Erickson talking to Michael Erickson, my grandpa, about the Cold War. First question. When you were a child, did you hear people talking about nuclear weapons?
Yes, we heard about it all the time. In fact, my parents, we would plan what would happen if sirens went off, meaning that there was going to be a nuclear attack and an atom bomb attack. That's what they called it. And we had places in the house that we would hide or whatever. We had neighbors that were digging air raid shelters in their backyards, if you can believe it, and
Wow.
lining them with cement and all that, and storing food down there like we store food now for earthquakes. Some people do. Well, that they did for a nuclear attack.
Question number 2. What were your feelings about these weapons?
My personal feeling was I didn't really live in fear about it. There was a lot of talk about it, and we had to practice uh, air raid drills. It was definitely on everybody's mind, but myself, I didn't really have fear because I I don't know if I thought that it never would happen, or if it did, there's nothing I could do about it anyway. So, and basically, again, my faith
Yeah.
and just trust in God.
Question number 4. Were you ever afraid of a nuclear weapon?
No, again, I can't say that I was, but there was a lot of fear of nuclear weapons, and I had friends of mine in school that, they'd have nightmares about it or stuff, but myself, honestly, I don't remember ever really being fearful of a nuclear weapon.
Question number 4. What did your school do to prepare for air raid drills during this time?
Okay, we used to have bomb shelter drills where they would sound like an alarm throughout the whole school, and then we would have to get down and go under our desks and sort of put our hands over our head, and you were supposed to keep your eyes closed in case there was any glass breaking or anything like that, so it would get in your eyes. So we did that quite often. I mean, maybe, I don't remember, it could have been once a week even.
Question number 5. Who were some famous people you admired during this era?
During that era. Um, well, I admired President Eisenhower. He had been a general and had been really a big part of winning the Second World War, and he was our president, so you kind of had the feeling that he really had a good military background and for defense and all that, so he was somebody that I admired. Um, Trying to think of, politicians, I'd say he probably was the main one. I can't think of another politician.
Question number 6. What do you remember watching on TV or hearing on the radio about the Cold War?
Well, you would hear how Russia was building up their arms, and they had what they called the arms race, and it was Russia and then America were trying to outdo each other with the best technology as far as bombs or that, and then the best defense against the bombs. So you'd hear that Russia had the ability to send a atomic bomb on a missile, and it could reach the California coast or something like that, and or it could reach Alaska, and then you'd hear, no, now they can go even further, and then they would sort of count the number of nuclear weapons. Somehow they had an idea of how many Russia had and how many we had, and that we had more than they had, or that we could, if we intercepted by our radar that there was one coming, there might be a 15-minute warning, but by then we could launch, some massive number to destroy Russia before. So it was just sort of, you'd hear all this in the news back and forth about who was the most prepared. And
Question number 7. Where were you when the Berlin Wall fell, and what did you think would happen next?
it was with when Reagan was president, so let me think. I was probably in college, and I'll have to look, Julie. I was either in college or maybe in the Army, but hearing it fall, I mean, I just thought I was so happy for those people that were in East Germany that they could be reunited with their families in West Germany, and really that we were winning the Cold War, or that we had won the Cold War, because Russia before would have never let anything like that happen.
What was your thoughts on the war in Vietnam during this time?
Now I can give you a lot on that because I was in the Army during the Vietnam War, during the height of the Vietnam War. I myself didn't go to Vietnam, but I worked in a hospital on the East Coast, on an Army base that was the orthopedic hospital for the whole East Coast. So this meant that anybody that lost a limb, an arm or a leg or a hand or a foot in Vietnam, when they were able to come to the States for treatment, they would come to our hospital if they lived on the East Coast, if their families lived there, so they could be close to their families. And so I met a lot of people, a lot of young guys that had left parts of their body in Vietnam, and I got to be friends with many of them, and they all said, without exception, that if they could, they would go back, and that they thought we should be there. So my thought at the time was I didn't know what was right or wrong. There was a lot of people that thought it was wrong, and there was all the demonstrations and anti-war things. But I thought if these guys left parts of their body there and thought it was right, how was I to say anything else? So my opinion at that time was that we should be there. Now I'd say in hindsight, my opinion now is that no, it was a mistake. And but at that time, I went along with the people that had actually gone there.
What were some of your thoughts slash beliefs regarding the Soviet Union, like during this time?
Well, I mean, the Soviet Union, or we always referred to it as Russia, but I mean, it was different nations that were part of the Soviet Union, and just that they were sort of our enemies, and it was sort of something that, like, if anything was wrong in our country or that, it was always like we had the Soviet Union to blame. And I think that in a way it kept us from dealing with a lot of other problems, because they were sort of the evil one, and we were the good guys and they were the bad guys. But my feeling was that there were a lot of probably wonderful, normal, everyday people in the Soviet Union, and they were just sort of pawns. And here we in America, we're sort of everyday people, and the government's making decisions and doing these things, and you think you know what's right, but they sort of tell you what they want you to believe, and so it's you really, it's hard to know. I thought that, I mean, there was something that we used to call the Red Scare. That's what they called the communists, the Reds, and it was like there was so much paranoia in America and about nuclear bombs, or about if there were spies in America and if they were influencing, our education system or whatever. And it was like anything that was evil or wrong, it was a communist plot, And there were things that were legitimate, but there were a lot of things that weren't, and it just was fear mongering type thing of just fear.
Thanks for helping me with my interview.